But if you close your eyes, does it almost feel like nothing's changed at all? And if you close your eyes, does it almost feel like you've been here before? Now am I gonna be an optimist about this? How am I gonna be an optimist about this? How am I gonna be an optimist about this? Now am I gonna be an optimist about this? Where do we begin? The road or our sins? Where do we begin?
Well, we recently had the joy of meeting many of you guys at the New Christendom Press annual conference here in Ogden, Utah. We heard from some great speakers. Of course, we had Dr. Stephen Wolfe out, Andrew Isker, CJ Engel, J. Chase Davis, Joel Webbon, Eric Kahn, Dan Burkholder, and most importantly, of course, myself. I'm just kidding. I'm not keeping it. That was a joke. That was a joke.
I was waiting for it.
It was a joke.
I was like, who other than Ryan?
I'm not keeping it. Okay.
Can we stop?
No, I'm just kidding. You can cut in. And we had some great time with other events, like there was feats of strength, there was music, there was dancing, there was laughter, there were tears. Really, it had it all. So we thought we'd sit down here in the King's Hall and just debrief from the conference, explain some of our favorite aspects of it, what we learned, what we loved, and what we're looking forward to in next year's conference. And yes, we are already looking ahead and even have tickets open for next year's conference with some new twists coming up. So sit down with us here in the King's Hall and we'll talk through it all with you. The King's Hall podcast exists to make self-ruled men who rule well and win the world.
Well, welcome to this episode of the King's Hall podcast. I'm joined today by two kings. First of all, Dan Burkholder, Brian Sauvé. And I say two because my name has been changed. I'm not a king anymore.
Nope.
I'm a commissioner.
He is the commissioner. In fact, I require the meme to be put on the video right now that somebody made. And I'm going to derail right now and tell the story.
You have to.
So we're at the New Christendom Games, which we'll talk about. It's amazing feats of strength. We got like 40 guys, 30 guys out on the field, just lifting 250-pound sandbags, doing, all sorts of crazy stuff, mile run. And then, about 2/3 of the way through the event, Ben and I are up in the stands watching because, not because we couldn't have done it ourselves, but for other reasons, personal reasons that I don't want to get into. And Eric has been over there and he says, I've got to pee. He's had to pee for like 8 hours or something, but keeps talking to people. And he's like, I'm going to go pee. He walks away. We turn around, talk to each other. 30 seconds later, we look back. Eric is not at the bathrooms. Eric is on the field. And he's in a full suit with a tie, and it's like 115 degrees. And we see Eric there standing between the Mount Athos guys who are each the size of the Rocky Mountains, like the quads of Mount Zeus, Mount Olympus. Like they are absolute kings.
Quad Zeus.
Throwing 250-pound sandbags like they are filled with air. And Eric is like there between them, and it looked from a distance like he was teaching them how to lift the sandbag. Like, no more. You got to activate more quad there.
Which was not what was happening. I was trying to get pointers from them. But here's the deal.
Eric is a coach.
Brian says this. It's the running joke in the office. I like to get involved.
I
stood on the sidelines for as long as my soul could take it.
Yeah.
And then I was like, I need to go cheer on the boys.
Yeah.
I need to talk them up.
Yeah.
I need to actually went hoarse,
Be among the people.
yelling encouragement.
Yeah. Ben and I went down too. We followed the lead. We were like, our fearless leader goes to the field. We must go to the field of victory.
Somebody, I think the meme has been on, but I think that was Vince Lombardi.
It was
They
Lombardi.
took Lombardi out, and there's Eric with the Packers, right? The Packers.
Yeah.
Just doing his thing.
I just want
Coach
to comment on how much better the story has become in the few days that
Yeah.
you've been telling it.
Yeah.
It was record-breaking heat. The scorching
was
sun.
hot,
Eric in full wool.
Full
suit
garb.
It's a wolf. Yes.
6-piece
amongst two mythological creatures
Yes.
known as
Yes.
the Mount Athos
I'm telling
men.
you.
Yes.
Are they men? Are they demigods? We don't
Go
know.
look at the new Christendom Instagram, and in the game slide, you'll see one where one of these homeboys has a sandbag on his shoulder, and I'm telling you, his quads are the size of the Wasatch Peaks.
They literally.
I'm telling you right now, no homo here, right?
They literally are
Beautiful
that
men.
size.
Okay, no homo, beautiful men,
Beautiful men.
specimens. Okay, thank you for gracing us with your presence. All of the
well,
competitors.
Festinolente. That's
has
all the
been
time
great.
we have
It's
for
been
this
great having a
episode of the
company.
King's Hall.
Yeah, it was interesting because I do remember going out on the field and the vibes were so high. I mean, Andrew Isker is finishing his mile. There is a crowd chant filled with stomping. Isker. And he's coming down. I said to Andrew afterwards, I said, Andrew, did you hear the people? They were so proud of you. And he said, no, they were cheering because they didn't want me to die. We had such a good time. Again, just the energy around that event was really cool. It was interesting. I felt a little bit bad. I went on the field. The guys are soaked. Some people are having like heat stroke. And I had just walked on the field. And two of the other guys from Mount Athos, they came up and they're like, would you like an electrolyte drink?
Can we get you a
Pastor
water?
Khan, would you like some water? And there's these guys like passed out on the ground,
Like have heat stroke.
have heat stroke. And I was like, yes, I would.
I would like some cold
Unlike
water.
David, what I should have done, I should have taken the water and said, I will not drink this water. I will pour it out
Yeah.
because of the sacrifice.
Did
of
you do
these
that?
Men. I drank it.
Okay. That would have been next year.
I was very hot.
Yeah, you were again in full suit.
No homo, but
Like not that hot.
wait,
Oh,
is
we're
this
talking about temperature.
not the right time? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
But it was cool. I think the
was
event, we had
Martin cut
bagpipes.
that.
We had bagpipes.
It was the pinnacle of White Boy Summer.
Tate Taylor, wonderful job putting on that event. I do think for a lot of people, the reason that was so big is, again, it's just these little signs of life in communities that you can just do things, that stuff is being put together, that things are being accomplished. We're not just, this is the online people who don't know us, right? It's the constant, like you guys are just LARPing,
Yeah.
right? You're not building anything. You're not doing anything. You're just LARPing. You're a bunch of fat pastors who aren't actually on the field as commissioners. And here we are commissioning
Dude,
it.
and my favorite part of that is that the winner of the event, Levi Whitley,
I think that's right.
I think I got that right. The winner of the event is a dad of like 6.
Well, and
Killed it. I mean, absolutely killed it.
one of the coolest things was we had a competitor who was just at the time. And I think he didn't actually make the time. But Levi and another guy went down to the line with him and helped him finish all their sets to see him across the finish line. That was just such a cool moment.
Yep.
Kind of the no man left behind. We had a guy from our church who's, Army guy who's used to working with young men. He's like tears running down his eyes. He's like, this is what men do. Like, you don't leave anybody behind. It was just such a cool
That was awesome.
experience. And I think it inspired a lot of people. We were talking with Stephen Wolfe and the other speakers, like they want to do it next year. And so we're talking about competing. Now, I will say this, if one is to be the commissioner, one can't compete
Yeah, that's true.
because he has to inspire others with his non-competition.
He's more of a figure.
Dan's face right now.
He's more of like an icon,
Yes.
that inspires men with his greatness.
Yes. In a suit.
He doesn't go down he stays on Mount Olympus. He doesn't come down
well, he comes down, but in regal attire.
to crown the victor.
Yes.
I just am disgusted right now This is awful.
This is
I'm
amazing.
so disappointed.
Dan, where were you? Were you on the field?
Wait a second. Hang on. Whoa.
I thought it was about the man in the arena, Dan.
Yeah. Dan was on an arena, a couch.
I did go home.
That
and
is
I
great.
did take off my suit and I did lay down on the couch and I did take a nap.
You didn't regret it.
Which is actually a different.
Well,
Now you
I do now.
Now
but
your heart
now that I'm
rises.
out of the moment.
Yeah.
You know, but then I had to get dressed and go back to another event.
But that
night.
is actually a form of leadership because all men are leaders. And so it's, what do you call it? Like couch potato leadership?
I mean, if you come for the commissioner.
Can we get like a bunch, like some sound effects there?
That is, wow. I did also, like, I'm talking up how
if
we're
I'll
going to
ever
compete and
recover.
win. But then Tate did say, like, what would be great is to have the Haunted Cosmos guys commentating. And I will say that may be where I belong.
I love how you guys are so amped and you're like, we're definitely going to compete next year. But obviously, like I'm discluded because
I may compete.
I'm the commissioner. I have to commentate. Like, so our new Christendom Press team is now down to the guy who sits on the couch when the games are going on. That's our old Dan.
Dude,
this
it's
is what I'm
fine.
hearing. Dan, you're our only hope.
You're our only hope. No, we're going to do
we're
it.
gonna do
It's
it.
in. It's in.
We're going to do it.
Obi-Wan
It will be the
Burkholder.
Curios Capital team, already
That's
inside
right.
source. We did promise as speakers that we would compete. I never promised to be all natty.
I didn't say you had to be all natty. That's what I'm saying. No, of course not. Okay, guys, we become the trend twins. Trend quadruple. Yes.
I'm gonna be like Alex. And by next year, I mean by like
October. Yeah.
I'm just throwing.
Yeah, let's be clear.
Wait, did you promise me like that I would
No,
compete?
because you were on your couch. I was talking to people who are actually at
I'm
the
not
event.
saying that I'm going to be juicing for this event, but there will be signs.
There will be signs.
Like when I'm benching 445 pounds by April of this year,
You'll
which
know.
is slightly more than I bench now.
April of this year?
Yeah, it's in the past already. I can't even see, like, my mind is being addled by the
this.
steroids already.
Yes. Speaking of mind-altering experiences,
Great transition.
the conference itself, was
Classic transition.
Classic transition.
Yeah.
There were a lot of speeches that I think were really good. Everybody seems to be consensus. The one that really moved everyone most, I think, was Stephen Wolfe.
Yeah.
And so, Dan, he was talking about home. I guess just give us a quick kind of recap. We'll have these out hopefully very soon if they're not already out by the time this comes out, so you can listen to it. But what was Stephen talking about? Why was it so powerful?
Yeah, I think what he really did is gave definition of something that we all intrinsically know. Actually, his whole talk was just expositing a definition of home that I wish I could remember off the top of my head. But essentially, there's this idea that the place that you're in, home, is actually a part of you and you're a part of it. And I thought one of the most apt points, he gets to like the culmination of really talking about home and how a house is just a house. It's not necessarily a home. Like you can assume that there are houses that are homes and things like that. But he said, if you replace the people, you replace the place. Like the people are what makes a house into a home. The people are what makes, grandma's farm in Montana or, like the lake house that I grew up going to that was my uncle's place. It's the people
The
that are
Indian
really
reservation.
Well, I only went there once and I almost got knifed by an 8-year-old. And then my brother got a jagged cut on his foot from a broken liquor bottle in the lake. So let's just say that I didn't form a complacent delight through the actions of my generations that trained me for my heavenly home from that experience.
I love the look on Dan's face. He was on a tear.
And then a classic moment of the King's Hall occurred.
So for example, so I grew up in Wisconsin. I'm just going to ignore whatever you just said, whatever that was. So I grew up in Wisconsin, moved away in 2011, and last summer I visited home. I visited my grandma, who's still alive. She's well in her 90s, late 90s, and my uncle and cousins and relived some of the experiences that I had in my childhood. I really wanted to share that with my children. And it was something that he brought up in his talk, or it was something that I wrote down in my notes from his talk. I can't recall which, but either way, there is something special about a place where you've had experiences, where you've had your people together and you've grown up, that you want to share with your children. You want them to have the same experiences that you had. Even something they won't get it. They just won't understand. But it's like, hey, there's that island in the lake. That was a really special place to me because I had these experiences here, and it's like the place almost calls to you because you made it something special. And it is something special to you, and you want to share those experiences. But I really did think one of his points was really interesting for our applications today is that if you replace the people, you replace the place. And he was talking specifically about this immigration madness and invasion of our country, because when you try to replace the people, you replace the place. It's not the same anymore. And we know this. Stephen Wolfe talked about Napa, where he grew up, and this may have been offline. He was just talking about the tragedy of going home, sort of like the hobbits when they returned to the Shire at the end of the series, and it doesn't look the same. They remember a place that's home, but it's all been mechanized, and the great trees have been cut down.
The party tree.
And the party tree is gone, and the people are being replaced, or there are different nefarious folks that live there now, and it's a tragedy. And he said that a lot of us have those experiences, and he himself included, when he goes home to California, because that's still home to him. And he sees just the destruction of his place that he grew up in and loved and is such a part of him, and it's being destroyed. And it's one of the greatest tragedies of our time is that our homes are actually being destroyed to the point where he can't come back because the people have been replaced. It's not the same place.
Even pointed out that I have the definition. I took note. I like his definition a lot. But he said that you can't transfer these memories. You can't make a place home for someone who hasn't had the complacent delight generated by their own experience of the place. Mm-hmm. So the sadness also comes in, like for him, taking his kids to this drive, this entrance, this road to what was the family home, and it's still got the Wolf Ranch. The Wolf Ranch there.
Yeah, it's got
and he can take a picture with his kids, but he can't pour into them his own delight in the place.
Yeah.
He said his definition was that home is a place of complacent delight generated by the activity of loved ones, which adorns space with intimate familiarity across generations in order to perfect the union of a particular people and to foreshadow the union of people to come. So, and he's even talking about of home to come. This was imperfectly noted down. He'll be like, that's not actually the perfect definition, but it foreshadows our heavenly home. So the idea of complacent delight is really important in this, that it's like a complacent love is like an almost pre-rational love. It's not a love that's generated by your will that you say, I'm going to love this thing. It's a delight that's it's before that, automatic. It's assumed. It's in the background programming of your heart.
And it's something you may not even realize until you don't have it anymore.
Yes.
How much you genuinely loved it. So, one thing that I talked to him before his talk, I had said, there are a lot of people that are moving right now, all across the country. A lot of people are moving here. And I tell people before they move that you don't realize how much you will miss home. You underestimate that. And there will always be a part of you that is left back in that place, that desires to go back to home. Mm-hmm. And I said that the hope is that, because I feel this, right? The hope is that my children will have never experienced that. This is their home. Mm-hmm. They won't have that war within them to return to home because they are home. And so that's why it's really important for our mission, and something that we've talked about many, many times in church and on the podcast, is that we're building institutions, we're building experiences, we're building a people in a place so that our children will love it here. They'll love our homes. They'll have fond memories of home. It'll be a place of Sabbath and of rest and a place to return to, that their hearts would actually be one here. And so that's something that I hope that my children never experience, is that they will be home.
So this is one of the things I think that's challenging for people who are wading through these issues. On the one hand, like let's say Colorado, I left Colorado. It's where I grew up. The mountains are home. We grew up in a certain place, but it was devoid of healthy Christian culture. And so at some point you make a decision where you're like, yeah, but that's not enough.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm going to actually forsake home as I knew it, because, well, part of it is all my people had left it as well. So it wasn't really home in the same sense, even though there were memories from childhood and stuff like that. And you can make a decision to say, okay, we're going to establish a new home, and that's going to be hard. And I look back at our forefathers who sailed across the ocean to do that and say like, yeah, it probably won't feel like home for us. My wife's family, you've got Europeans from France and Italy, and they would always talk about like the old country. I remember the old country, but then their children don't remember that. So it's totally different. I do feel like it's this tension because you have evangelicals who are like, people in place mean nothing. The only realm that matters is the heavenly and the church. But then I think the word complacent is so important here.
Yeah.
Because you can't rationalize that away.
No.
What I do long for in Utah is that even my kids, we came here, we were older. So it's not quite the same as you, but I have noticed in the couple years we've been here, I always think about returning when you go on a trip and you return. Like as we pull into Ogden, it's like, this is home. Mm-hmm. It's becoming home.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. And as far as the Big Eva establishment, Brian, talk to your speech at the conference. This is really one of those universals that are weaponized.
Yeah.
Because the answer is, well, the world is not my home.
Yeah.
And so it's just dismissed that this idea that home is actually a real thing.
And then it just becomes a bludgeoning tool for multicultural globalism.
Yes.
That this liberal order, we take a cute little gospel saying, totally misapply it, and say, well, it's good to not have a home. It's good to be vagrant because that's what the economy does to people now. Yeah.
Yeah. The idea of a weaponized universal is that people can appeal to weaponized universals or some big, shiny, universal biblical verse or principle to avoid needing to have any specific knowledge of a topic or to treat it accurately within its category. So it's a great example that, we're constantly told, like, the nations are coming to us. What a good thing. You shouldn't idolize your home or your country or have a patriotism, or you shouldn't want to defend the borders. Open borders are great because, heaven is our home. We're just passing through. And they're getting their categories completely mixed up. They're acting like God did not weave into the world a deep longing for a place and to give us an experience of that is non-ultimate, of course. Like, it's not, our home here is not our ultimate home. But what I love about the ending of Stephen's definition of home is that our experience of home here is intended to train us for and prepare us for that heavenly home, for the eternal home. So it's like, to use the classic example, it's like the last battle when the unicorn says, this is the place I've always longed for. But heaven, the new heavens and new earth in Lewis's Narniad, it is like the Platonic ideal of the place they came from. So England isn't lost, it's there in its perfection. Narnia isn't lost, it's there in its perfection. And I think that Stephen's getting at a similar thing here, that our heavenly home doesn't destroy and eradicate all of our experience of our earthly homes. It is that experience perfected. Right. Just like our glorified, resurrected selves, they're not the diminution of our bodies, they're the apotheosis of our bodies. It's the perfection of our bodies. It's not a renunciation of the goodness of creatureliness or createdness. It's the perfected, glorified experience of creatureliness and createdness.
Well, and I think too, just to put it in kind of like an earthly, sort of like, I don't know, or more like earthy kind of metaphor. Years ago, I did the corporate thing, for 2 decades almost. And I was always told, if you want to move up in companies, you got to move every like 18 months to 3 years.
Yeah.
And so we did that. We lived in Colorado, we lived in Kentucky, Maryland, Illinois, Indiana, back to Colorado, different part of Colorado, then to Utah. But somewhere along the way, I remember reading Wendell Berry talking about home, and I was thinking about trees. And, Deanna, I think this would connect with you. If you want a really sturdy tree, even a highly productive fruit tree, can you move it every year? Can you move it every 2 years? No, the way you get great orchards is you drive by one and you're like, this has been here for 200 years. Like, that's a good orchard. So even for us as people, can you be rooted and fruitful in the best possible way if you're constantly being uprooted? Well, obviously not.
It's generated by the actions of our ancestors too. Like, there's this, growing up in the military, I didn't grow up my dad was in the military, to be clear. And one thing that the military culture does is it robs you of the experience of home. So my experiences of childhood home are Montana, my grandma's place that we would go to every summer for several weeks. And like just the particular actions of my grandmother that aren't like glorious. They're not, it's like the cereal that she would buy for us when we came over, or the junk pile my grandpa made of all the old cars he was constantly tinkering with. But the military rootlessness created a lack of that experience until moving to Utah and putting down roots and creating that experience, like myself. So it's interesting having that perspective of being the tree that was like, and same thing in a different way than what you just described. California, Ohio, England, Utah. It was just, and my wife moved even more than that. It was like every 18 months. So she lived in probably 10 different places growing up. And it does create in you a feeling of lostness, that you're not connected to anything or anywhere. And I think a lot of people are experiencing that even in their place, that modernity and technology tends to deracinate us. It cuts us off from the roots of our people. Even if you grow up in the same town that your great-grandfather did, you are likely very much deracinated. You're cut off from the activities of your grandfather. You probably don't live in the same place. It's probably been highly developed. It's probably a whole new demographic that lives there. You probably don't share the same trade or community or ways of life. You've been globalized in the way you think through the internet. So even Stephen said, I think today on X, that he's going to do, I think, a lone bulwark or something, talking about what his home kind of, that definition and what he's saying to create isn't a universal that says you should never move.
Well, and that's why I think that's so important, is because as we talk to people who are thinking of moving, they have all the vestiges of the earthly home, but they have no Christian community.
Yeah.
And so I think, and I did this, so I'm speaking from experience. I did this for a time where you would actually do harm to yourself and your family because you want to hold on to that element of home. But for many of us, maybe it wasn't Christian. Right. Yeah. And so you're torn between like, well, do I stay where my people were or are, even though it's not healthy, it's not a Christian environment, or do I pick up and move?
And CJ talked about this after the conference as well, that before his moving from California to Tennessee, he loves California. It's his people, it's his home, but he recognized that for them, tactically, California is not going to be retaken from the inside, but only from the outside. So his goal is like, I'm going to prepare generations of my family, along with many others, so that at some future point, California can be retaken as conquerors. Like that's literally how he describes it. It's not a forsaking of his home. It's going and pursuing a place where he can create that home and the people, and the home can create the people then that could be worthy of such a task in the future.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things, I think it's a tie-in to Joel's talk, was really what liberalism has done to culture. I would also commend, of course, they're on the New Christendom Network, but Stephen Wolfe's show, The Lone Bulwark.
Yeah.
He has a really good 3-part episode on how liberalism has subverted Christianity. And he's talking specifically about a piece from Andrew Walker. There's a lot of elements to it. And Joel talked about this, I've addressed all these issues in the church across the years. And he said, I finally discovered that really it comes down to two things. The car is liberalism, but the engine is egalitarianism, right? But behind every issue is an egalitarian, and I think pushed largely by Marxism, but an egalitarian impulse to flatten every distinction, And it's interesting. I've heard Michael Spengler say this, but he said fundamentally, egalitarianism is a hatred for God because it doesn't want to admit that God is higher than we are. There's a hierarchical relationship between us and the Lord, right? So you can look at the way we deal with race, ethnicity, nations. You can look at sex, piety. Fundamentally, the through line is egalitarianism. So I guess we'll start with Dan. Do you agree with that? Has that been a process too? I guess I would ask for you, like Joel described, where like you kind of see it more and more over the years.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Brian had talked about this also in his talk about recognizing the natural hierarchy that God puts into all of creation, especially into humanity, where he is going to, obviously he gives men more talents than others. And so obviously there's like natural gifting and things like that, but it's not that alone actually, because for some reason, God even determines to take the 5-talent guy and to bless him in some radical ways and to set him higher. And this is just the natural order. And so when you try to erase those distinctions, really, I think you do see it in so many different aspects. You see this through generations, to where you have fathers that essentially, as their children grow older, they diminish in a way their authority instead of continuing to inform their generations. For example, Eric, your eldest son is going to be married shortly, and you were very involved in making sure that he had a really good wife. You know, that was really important to you. Also with his career, what he's going to be doing with that. But what egalitarianism does is it essentially says, no, now you're my peer. You're 17, 18 years old. You're now an adult, and you can make all of these decisions for yourself. And then you essentially cast your son off, and he drifts and tries to figure it out for himself.
You just
and this
say,
is
good luck.
what most of us have experienced, where there's very little input because of, I don't know why, fear or I think primarily this egalitarian mindset of like, well, now we're peers. I've cast off this mantle of authority. It's no longer mine. And when you have fathers that don't have authority within their own homes or over their own sons to inform them, what sort of people would you expect? Well, it would be a people that essentially are isolated and have this feeling of self-sufficiency and do not want to submit to hierarchy. And so I do think that is a problem throughout. That was just one of the applications that I thought of, is within the home primarily. And what sort of people would that produce? It would not be a good people.
Yeah.
You know?
I think that's a really good point. One of the other things maybe would touch on, this is kind of overlap Brian's talk, my talk. But as we're talking about the conference, there's this weird thing, Brian, that you mentioned afterwards, after the conference, where on the one hand, I think you tweeted this, on the one hand, we seem like radicals to some people, like we're the extremists, but yet we were talking yesterday, we're radical because we're advocating for a return to quote unquote normal. Yeah. Like, so the things that we're pushing, I heard this a lot from people at the conference too. They're like, I was expecting this like crazy thing. And it's like, you're talking about Christian households, and we come here and there's all these beautiful families and kids, and they're just normal people who don't want to feel crazy for living the way that Christians did 100 years ago. And that was just, again, it was just normal.
Yeah.
So I guess speak to that phenomenon. Like, what were you seeing?
Yeah. I mean, the reality is that we are religious extremists in an objective sense, as measured against, because extreme is a measure in relation to something else.
Like the mean.
To the mean. So what is the norm religiously in the US? Against that mean, we are religious extremists. We apply our Christian faith to every aspect of what it means to be human, push it out all the way to the edges. It leads us to make decisions that are quite countercultural to our background culture. So it's not just doctrinal distinctions, but it's actually doctrinal distinctions that work out in cultural, social, political distinctions in our lives. So on the one hand, objectively, we are religious extremists, just objectively. And I no longer have any problem just saying, yeah, I'm a religious extremist. Hello. But then on the other hand, and what I hope this demonstrates, we're normal. we're very normal people, like healthy, normal families, great, flourishing households, children who are doing well and just being kids, sword fighting and whatnot, young boys being young boys, girls being girls, men being men, women being women, good friendships, barbecues on the weekends, hanging out as friends, playing golf, worshiping together on the Lord's Day. All of those things historically are quite normal, and we look just like normal Christian community. So what it demonstrates that both of those things are true, that we're both normal and religious extremists, is that our background culture is insane. So the reason that we are religious extremists is because our culture has been convinced that sexually degenerate, clinically insane, demon-possessed people are normal. And all of the results of people like that leading culturally in media and politics and the church. So they've created this world where they've normalized complete insanity and civilization-destroying insanity. So of course, anybody that resists going with that current of culture is going to look extreme. But when people come to our church, people visit, Stephen said this, lots of people, from speakers to just visitors, said, man, like your church, there's everyone I meet from Ogden, the men are great. They're high capacity. They're hard workers. They're in lots of different fields. They're not all just pastors or theologians, like normal, but they're also normal. They're normal guys. Like I'd be friends with them. I'd get along with them. I could tell that we could talk and have a good time. They're not dweebs. They're not autists. They're not strange. They're not like basement dwelling incels. They're not highly abnormal. Like the reality is, any religious extremist group like ours, you are going to have people who are strange. And conferences, usually there's some percentage of people that might show up and you're like, you are weird. You actually are the stereotype guy online that's like, in real life, everybody's kind of like, what's up with this guy? He's very strange, very bizarre, very weird. Genuinely, the people that came to our conference, the people at our church, they're not that. The vast majority of conversations I had with people were like, hey, Brian, I'm, so-and-so, I'm from, Connecticut, and my family, they're over here. That's my wife. Here are my kids. I'm a civil engineer, or I'm a software developer, or I'm, I'm a farmer, I'm whatever it is. And we just really enjoy the content. Have had a great time here. I know you're busy. Like, thanks for putting this on. Glad to be here. And they're just totally normal, non-socially awkward people.
I think that's actually a huge encouragement from the conference. Is I've gone to other conferences across the years, and normally with the speakers, there's like, I don't know, sort of like the sycophant thing where you're like, they see you as like up on a pedestal, and there are people who monopolize your time, even though there's a line of 50 people. I would say the vast majority of people that I talked to at the conference, to your point, you could tell they're just quality families, quality people. Pastor Khan, we just want to thank you. Know you're busy. We brought you this gift. I had some people give me, some nice bourbon from Kentucky and stuff like that. Really love you. We'll let you go. Keep pressing on, keep doing the work. Just want to be an encouragement. That was the vast majority. One of the other things I thought was interesting is it's probably a disappointment especially to the anti-Christian nationalist crowd. But I saw J.D. Hall post about this. He was like, it's weird. Like I went here and other conferences are like really mad at these guys. And then I went to quote unquote, there's a lot of Christian nationalists in the building, especially the speakers. I went to their conference and they're talking about positive visions and they're excited to build and to do the work. They're encouraging one another. There was like zero negativity about what other people are doing, about the detractors. Dan, we talk a lot about this, but the importance of having a positive vision, plus then the men in the room, sponsors, our friends, other speakers. I was shocked, as I am every year, the number of builders. Mm-hmm. They don't want to complain about it. They want to do something about it.
Yep.
So talk just a little bit about that.
Yeah, I actually had, he's a very high capacity man. He's a builder, gets a lot done. He's got his hands in everything from like cotton processing to meat processing to automotive battery manufacturing. I mean, this guy is like, he's a mover and a shaker. And he said he was most impressed by, first, the high quality of the general attendee and also the men from our church. He said that almost every conversation he had was about building, and that people weren't just there to listen to some good talks.
No.
And which is a great success for us, right? Because one of the things that we've said from the very beginning, I remember when we were talking about this project of New Christendom Press, was that we wanted to inspire men to build the new Christendom. We didn't say like, oh, we're doing it all. Like we're essentially like, the center, we're Rome. We've never thought that. We wanted to inspire others to build. And in order to inspire men to build, you have to have a vision for the future. If you recall all the way back in the beginning of when we started doing this project, and we talked about the stone cutter's motto, we who cut stones envision cathedrals, or something like that.
Yeah.
That's essentially the mantra of many of these men, even if they didn't adopt it exactly, was essentially that they have a positive vision for the future. And that's something that we continually talk about, because good leaders are good communicators. And so our mission is to continually communicate a positive vision for the future. And these men and women and families and children, generations, Lord willing, have a positive vision for the future and inspire them to build something. And it is really fascinating, Brian, when you talk to these guys who are, different forms of engineers, or they're in tech, or they work with their hands, or they're in investing or finance or whatever it is, and how they're applying their trades, their skills, their talents that God has given them to actually build something towards the purposes of building a new Christendom, and by blessing their generations by doing so. And in ways that I would have never thought, that's what somebody should do. We should do this. They have just taken this positive vision. They've been inspired, and their hearts have been won to build something for their generation, something that they won't necessarily see the fruit of themselves. It is just really exciting that was the general tone and atmosphere. A lot of the conversations I had were probably different, because you guys are much more in the arena of ideas and in that battlefield of ideas. And I'm much more in the field of finance and investing and business. And I had guys pitching me ideas on, developments for building Christian cities, and how do we structure those things? How do we attract investors? What other business opportunities exist that really we need coalitions of investors and great business minds to get together and to further build, and so most conversations I had were about building, which is completely different than the other conferences that I had, because it ended up being like, well, I'm a worm, you're a worm, we're all worms, gospel worm stuff. And then but you never actually do anything, so it was good.
Could we pick at scabs of online controversies?
Oh, right.
Hey, give me the tea on this thing. And, that guy tweeted this, and this article was written, and that podcast was made. And can I just tell you, I had almost, if the rounding would be to zero of those conversations with hundreds of people that came, and our talks, the speakers it was not an exercise in scab picking of online controversy. It was
that activity, by the way, is as disgusting as you described it.
I don't want to do the people at this conference, the speakers on down. None of us want that. What we want to do is to say, guys, okay, we disagree on some things, I'm sure, here and there. What can we do? Our nation is a ship with a bunch of holes in the hull. What do we need to do? How can we make it different for our children? How can we be faithful Christian men and family and businessmen and pastors and leaders and et cetera here?
Well, this is actually something that, because I could be like any of us prone, use social media to jump into some of those dog piles or, whatever. But it's actually something I've learned from a lot of the business guys that we've interfaced with, the builders, is you'll talk to them about social media or something somebody said, or, whatever the online spat of the day is. And they'll be like, oh yeah, I saw that. So tell me about this. Cause they're operating in this world you don't see. And I think there's something healthy about cultivating an attitude of I don't really care about that. So I would just say to all those guys, and I know many of them listen to the show, I've been encouraged. It's caused me we were talking about this the other day with one of our elders, Kevin Griffin. But he said, Eric, I noticed that you didn't jump into that. And I said, yeah, wise pastor Kevin once told me that you don't have to grab every passing dog by the tail. Of course, he told me
just to watch it bark.
Just to watch it bark. And I think what it is those controversies will often rob you of your energy that you could pour into a building project. And one other thing I'll say related to this is, the proverb, the glory of a king is his people. And as we looked out and the number of compliments and the great work that we saw our people doing, not only our audience, but I'm talking about refuge people.
Yeah.
I was so moved by that, their love, the desire to show hospitality to people who are in rough and discouraging situations, to be able to focus on your people, your local place. And truly, Spurgeon had a great lectures to my student. He had a great lecture on this to the pastors. It's from Ecclesiastes, but you hear your servant cursing you, don't forget that you've also cursed others. And I think it was something like have a blind eye and have one blind eye and one deaf ear. And it's really becoming of leaders to be able to just say, like, I don't know, man, I don't care. Like, there's work to do. I can't spend all my time on Gashmu. We have an important work set before us. Let's go do that work and not be so absorbed with the controversy, Brian.
The controversy.
That we skip out on the good work. And realistically, to your point, hardly anybody was talking about any of that.
No, the thing, here's the attitude that I want. And to the point where we're talking about this coming 2026 conference, 362 days from now. And we're thinking, what do we want to talk about? No, nothing set in stone, but the things that are swirling around my mind are the combination of normal religious extremists, like how to be both. Normal religious, your average, everyday, ordinary religious extremist, and the spirit of Nehemiah. The work is great, which we are doing. We cannot come down to squabble with you. Those are the things that those are on the front of my mind, because as we look at, even in our sphere, which is media, like New Christendom Press is a company, we aim to produce high quality media across lots of mediums that would pursue the work of building a new Christendom. And I think of all of the resources that we want to exist that will, Lord willing, take much of our time and focus to make excellently. And I think, would I rather spend my time doing that or squabbling with doxers and homosexuals on Twitter? It's not that difficult of a question when you put it that way. And so I would encourage, one of the things I think we could do really a better job at, even in the Christian nationalist movement, Stephen Wolfe talked about this a little bit too, is that we have to figure out how to make sure that everything we do is connecting to the great positive vision that we have for our nation, people, home. We do have to attack. We have to tear down strongholds. We have to destroy idols, lofty opinions raised against the knowledge of God. We have to love and protect our people from attacks. That's very important. Don't stop doing that. But we need to make sure that the major key tone of our work is we're doing a great work in the name of the Lord and with the blessing of our God. We expect it to succeed because God is with us and we can't come down from the wall that we're building.
Yeah, I think that's great. I was reflecting on this, something that the G3 guys had posted. They've had a big, kind of blow up internally, praying for them, and appreciate a lot of the wisdom that's come out of that. But one of the things that they said that I thought was really interesting, they had a new logo, and there was a point in a renewed vision where they said, we need to stop these platforms and ministries competing with each other and trying to destroy each other, which I think they're acknowledging. Unfortunately, their organization was a part of that. That's part of it too, where it's I'm willing to look at a guy with a different platform and they can say, hey, you're not really our speed. And I say, great, go do good work. Not interested in the least in tearing down what you're building. You're going to do it in different ways. We're going to do it in different ways. We had this discussion on the panel as well, where acknowledging that just like in the church, but in God's order, there's a hierarchy. Different people are going to play different roles. You're going to have guys like us that may be louder. You're going to have quiet builders. And we need to be slow to say, well, that guy's a coward because he didn't do it like me.
Everyone needs to know their job.
Yeah, there's a division of labor in any movement, but I think remaining friends, there's been a really cool spirit of that. I mean, the stuff Isker and those guys are doing, we applaud them. It's different in some ways than ours. Great. We're friends. We're going to support them. If we have pushback, it'll be offered generally privately, and vice versa.
Yeah, Stephen and I were talking about this one of the days about elite formation, because it's something that's been on our mind. Even last year's talk, I spent a lot of time in 2024 talking about elite formation within Christian boroughs. It's something that is just on a lot of our minds. And he had an interesting point that I hadn't considered before about why one of the reasons that Roman Catholics tend to dominate elite formation in American politics and even culture. 6 of the 9 Supreme Court justices are Roman Catholics. Okay, why is that? And his point that I hadn't considered was, well, one of the things Roman Catholics do well and Protestants do poorly is that Protestants tend to be hyper-schismatic around very niche insider baseball doctrinal distinctions. So for example, think about when you're looking for an elite speaking to some issue, most of us Protestants think like this. Well, I am a Reformed Baptist partial preterist, general equity theonomist, expository preaching, psalm inclusive but not exclusive, non-a cappella. I believe in instrument worship, and I'm patriarchal, not complementarian, and I believe in, like we make this big list and then we go, so I want an elite to teach me about economics, anything that agrees with every single one of those things all the way down the line. And the Roman Catholics are like, I'm a Roman Catholic. And they tend to act like the Roman Catholic Church isn't full of all sorts of schisms and groups and different in-groups and different, and it absolutely is, like just as much as Protestantism in many ways. But what they do a good job is when they're actually in their public-facing political, social elite formation, they don't do that. They don't do that the same way that Protestants do. So, I mean, I'm talking at the conference to guys like abolitionists, Reformed Baptists. And I'm not really a part of those camps, either one of those camps. But I'm talking to guys like that. I'm like, man, this is a great godly man and family, or great God, from doing great work. And whatever instinct in me wants to go, oh, but do they agree with me on these 10 to 15 different sort of niche second and third tier doctrinal issues? Or I can't really support and encourage and work with them. And that's actually stupid. And we need to not do that.
Yeah, and not from that, that example, it's like, okay. And then we also had people at the conference who were like, they would use the pro-life label. They're doing great work. Mm-hmm. And you're like, this kind of reminds me of like Constantine, where he like gets all the different sects and disagreements together. And he's like, y'all need to agree. And then we're doing stuff.
Yeah, we're going to have a statement by this, do it, bishops.
Stop going to war with each other.
Cut it out.
We have important work to do.
Yeah, and you have to have a certain type of mind for that, because it's actually not saying none of those things are important. They are important, but it's saying it, and this is the key aspect. When we're talking about elite formation, the whole point of an elite in a thing is that they are an elite in a thing, not a general elite in everything. That's not usually how God makes the world. There's not typically one guy that's like an elite at everything. You give him any topic and he can speak to it with encyclopedic knowledge. That's not how God made the world. Instead, you get a guy like Stephen, who's an elite in political theory, I would say, in our camp. He's done the homework. He's done the reading. He has the credentials. He's talking to the people who are relevant in the movement. He has a keen mind, and he's produced one of the key works on the subject in a scholarly format. Okay? Stephen Wolfe is not an elite in music. He's not an elite in eschatology.
He's pretty good at jazz.
He is good at jazz. He is a great saxophone player, from what I understand. He's not an elite great. He's not trying to be. And you don't actually have to say, like, unless Stephen Wolfe agrees with my eschatology, there's nothing there. That's not how elites are supposed to function in a community and a movement.
I think that's one of the downsides, I think, in our camp, the camp that we've kind of grown up, I'm using reform circles pretty broadly here. Yeah. But kind of this idea that the pastor is the expert on everything. And a lot of times what it does is it reveals how many times you're out of your depth. Mm-hmm. A good example would be, I think, this week, Peter Leithart had made some comments on immigration. You can read him on a lot of subjects and go, oh, that's insightful. That's really helpful. On that subject, it was like, no, like this is not
baptized 20th century liberalism.
Yeah, it was not good. And Isker actually addressed this in his talk, and I took it to heart of, we need to develop the muscle where a subject comes up and we say, I don't really know about that. I was listening to the Ted Cruz, Tucker Carlson exchange about Iran. And, Tucker's asking really good questions about who are the people, what's their ethnic background, like what's their government structure. And Cruz, of course, knows nothing about it, which was revealed. But then I was also thinking, but I also don't. Like, I'm not an expert on Iran, nor what is the actual political structure of Israel? I'm not an expert on that. But again, to Isker's point, having the muscle to say, I don't know, but let's ask someone who does. Let's talk to somebody who is actually an expert.
It actually gives you permission to be comfortable with not knowing everything about everything.
Because that's actually impossible.
Right. I actually don't need to worry about Iran. That's not my job.
Someone should, but
somebody should, but it's not me. Yeah, that's right. It gives you permission. It does take a weight off your shoulders.
Yeah.
When you're like, actually, I don't need to know about that. I do know somebody that does, though.
Yeah,
and let's talk to him, and it'd be really interesting.
AI is going to make this problem 100 times worse because people are able to quickly.
It's going to give you the false illusion of
knowledge. Some of the most interesting ways that I've seen people interact with AI are people who really get what we're talking about. There was a guy that said basically, a couple times a week, I go and do a zone 2 cardio on the treadmill, like 4 miles an hour walk. And he said, what I do is I just open up one of the AIs that has a voice mode and I talk to it. I say, hey, let's have a conversation about geopolitics. And then maybe it brings up some subject. He says, tell me more about that. And he's just like asking and learning in this conversant form. I thought that was really interesting. And the key is going to be for us like humility and curiosity, that we say, I don't know the subject. We need to rely on elites who do know subjects, but then also curiosity to say, I don't know. So go look it up if you're interested in it. And that's how you become a more interesting person, is you say, like this morning, I realized I have no idea about Iran. So I was trying to learn about it a little bit. I'm not going to be an expert in it, but I want to know a little bit more about it. And so when you run into the edges of your knowledge, what it should do is it should produce curiosity and humility, not arrogance and pretending. And you will get so much more interesting as a person and more useful if you'll just say like, I actually don't know. Can you give me a week though? I would love to learn about that. Do you have any books? Or let me go talk to this guy while I go. It's so refreshing to just do that and to experience that.
And I also think, to a large extent, to stay in our lanes. Like, for example, like even the way we pick talks, we try to give people a talk that's in their lane.
Yep.
Right. So it's like, there's a reason, Brian, that you're talking about all these things in a very, I want to say like intellectual, but it's like your talk stretched me, right? It stretched my vocabulary. I was like, wow, the universals, I really had to think about it, and that's good. And then Stephen's talk, it stretched me in a different way. I was like, wow, I've never been able to put words to some of these feelings and the complacent delight and all that. And that's what you want, but also as ministers of the word, where you don't have to say, I need to know everything about everything and then comment on everything publicly, which gets you into a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
But I think that we've had kind of examples of that in the past where guys do that. And so it's sort of like that's expected, that you have to have an opinion on everything.
Yeah.
And the reality is you just don't.
That's what weaponized universals do, particularly to the pastorate, is that because pastors can appeal to very true principles that actually the scriptures speaks to life. It is able to equip a man with everything sufficient for life and godliness. But that doesn't mean it's able to equip him for every particular subject matter expertise sort of thing for every conversation. He'll have the virtues and the principles if he is clothed in the Spirit, putting off the old self, putting on the new self by the Spirit of God. He'll have the virtues to go be the kind of man that could go learn and speak to various issues. But what pastors, they have this strong temptation to do is to think, if I can come up with a Bible verse that generally relates to a subject, I am able authoritatively to bind consciences on that subject. The immigration is a perfect example, like Dan brought up earlier, the Lightheart example, that you say the world is not our home and we're supposed to evangelize the nations. Therefore, globo, homo, multicultural, endless immigration, war machine, go burr, is good. Well, obviously, when I say it that way, you go, that's dumb. It doesn't follow. And yet, so much of our pop reformed, pop evangelical, political theory conversations have been on that level of discourse. They're genuine. And when you poke it with the tiniest needle, you realize how shallow it is. When Stephen Wolfe comes in and says, actually, our nation hasn't always been a nation of immigrants in the way that you're talking about. What the founders meant here, and here, and here in primary sources was they're talking about a very specific people group that they are able to assimilate and integrate, and they're made up of, and they have a certain characteristic and national culture. And so when you flee to weaponize universals, the temptation for pastors and ideologues everywhere is to bind consciences by a really ham-fistedly applied universal that you didn't even adequately understand how it related to the subject. It should be embarrassing for us.
It's actually one of the surest ways to be ineffective and unlikable. I mean, seriously, I'm going to give you a little secret here. So guys that are experts, if you want friends and to learn and to actually grow in networking, primarily I'm talking, is that you should be really interested in somebody else.
Yeah.
Because I think the instinct, if you're like, especially for pastors, but other men, doctors are actually really bad at this. I have a doctor friend who said doctors are like even worse than pastors at this. They're an expert in one field and they just assume expertise in every area that they can speak with confidence to anything. And it's one of the surest ways that one of these understated experts, true, genuine experts, will not like you and will not even waste their time with you. So like a man like Stephen Wolfe is like this. If I were to walk up to Stephen Wolfe and I was to treat him like a peer in political theory and philosophy and things like that, I know what he would do. Well, I'm assuming. He would smile and he would nod and say, wow, that's really interesting.
And he's sitting there thinking, this guy is clueless.
This guy has no idea what he's talking about.
An idiot.
It's the same thing in the business world. If you're to talk to a guy, you don't know that this man could be worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And you're telling him about your Bitcoin investing strategy because you have a tenth of a Bitcoin. And they're just going to smile and they're going to say, that's really interesting. Wow, this guy doesn't know a thing. And so if you want to be really effective at networking, is to actually have a right view of yourself and to ask the right questions and then shut up and just listen. Be a really good listener.
Yeah, I think a good example in our context as pastors would be, and we've had this a lot, right? The guy who comes to you and he says, you're supporting this Christian nationalist thing. It's a heresy. It's from the devil. You're like, great, tell me about it. What is Christian nationalism? And then the definition is so poor and so inaccurate that what you want to say is...
Have you read Stephen Wolfe's book on this?
Yeah,
well,
no,
I don't need to because the man's a heretic.
I already know.
Yeah.
So to your point, this is actually, we were talking about offline, but it was a skill I learned in journalism. They were like, you have to get over your own arrogance. Stop trying to show the expert that you know. Instead, the best way to get information is to be humble and to say, actually, tell me more about that. I don't know what that term means. I've actually never heard that before.
My favorite thing, man. People ask me a lot about music in church, just because we bumbled our way through. Like, I've been a music minister in different contexts, and we transitioned our church from like CCM to part singing. And so there'll be a couple people at this wasn't at this conference, but like another conference several years ago. A couple people were kind of picking my brain about it, and they were music ministers in their church, hoping to do something similar. And, you're giving them like, well, this is what we did. It might not work for you. We do Tuesday psalm sing, blah, 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 blah. And there was a guy that was like not a music minister, had no experience in the subject whatsoever, continually interrupting and being like, well, you know what I would do? I think, we should do it. Have you thought about this? And everyone there is just so exasperated, not because we're all full of ourselves, but because it's like, we've actually, we're peers. We've done this. We're trying to learn together and get something, out there in the open. And just don't be that guy. If I could just look into the camera.
Timid soul of the critic.
Don't be that guy.
But I think
just don't be that guy.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And to Dan's point, ask questions. We've done that so much actually with Stephen Wolfe. I don't understand this. Where does this come from? How would you deal with this issue? Instead of going in there pretending like I'm going to tell him something about it.
It's actually one of the best ways to make friends. Even here's another secret. Even if you're an expert, if you've read a lot, don't assume that you know everything, because then you can actually ask more informed questions. Yeah. You can say, well, how do you manage, overdue accounts receivables? Like, what do you do with that? You just ask like an informed question that could actually benefit you. And by him talking, you could actually like generate some ideas as to how you could improve this process, whatever it is, whatever the topic is, if you are able to ask good questions then.
Speaking of good questions, we can kind of tie things up with this. And this is like 2-hand pat on the back. No, I'm just kidding.
And then he proceeds to 2-hand pat himself.
Yes. No. Well, no, there was interesting. You mentioned music. And this is kind of all tied together. I said in my talk, as we've had success, from God, blessed by God, but as we've had success as a movement, Ogden, Refuge, in our camp, the number of detractors, haters, and critics actually goes up, not down, right? And one of the thoughts that I had from the conference was there's a group of people who, because they see some ascendancy in a movement, that it becomes like we're going to nitpick everything. And probably the funniest one was music related.
Yeah.
So Brian played Pompeii at my request. A request is maybe too light of a term for what I did.
I was practicing, and Eric walked in and said, "Are you going to play Pompeii?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Yes, you are."
I was like, "Please, Brian, please."
And I said, "I don't know it." And then I was like,
So Brian did a concert, and we had a smoke machine. We had people with flashlights.
so many Bethel jokes.
Everybody was playing or singing along to Pompeii. It was great. It was a beautiful moment. The people, they're beautiful. But what was interesting, several people online was like, Brian and Refuge have gone the way of Bethel, the things that they've criticized. Look at what they're doing in worship. Now, what's funny is I pointed out immediately, I said, this was a concert.
Wasn't worship.
It was not a worship service.
No.
But that nobody backed off.
Very few people, like multiple people actually doubled down after discovering it was a concert, and they were very muddled in their objections. It was a classic example of evangelicals failing to think clearly in categories, as if the problem with megachurches was that they cared about making people feel something, instead of that they were manipulating shallow emotionalism to attract them to a false and vapid version of Christianity that failed to be, that was sub-biblical. So it's like when we sing in church and we don't sing Pompeii and we don't have a smoke machine and it was a concert, but in church, when we sing in 4 parts with the lights on, streaming through the stained glass, and we're in 4 parts and we're singing a fuguing tune and the piano's there and the women's voices are rising up and the men's voices are holding it down on the bass and the kids are diving in, I feel things deeply.
First question, who do you think you are?
And that is a success because the Lord is the Lord of the limbic system. He invented it, actually. The Lord invented emotions and feelings, and they're good. And he invented beauty, and he invented the richness of harmony.
This is actually something connected to the whole CN movement, Christian nationalism, and like Stephen's talk. It was aimed at creating a visceral, sentimental attachment to home.
Yeah.
And that's not a bad thing. I think what you're talking about is, yes, in broader evangelicalism, it has become a vapid sentimentality and romanticism about, who knows what.
It's lowest common denominator shallowness attracting people to something not worth winning them to. Whereas you want to leverage beauty and emotion and feeling to attract people to the rightly ordered use of those things and something worth attracting them to.
That's right.
It's like, that's actually the goal. We really want to do that. It's the same error that like the TGC crowd classically made about marriage, where they were like, make sure you're not idolizing your spouse. Let's elevate singleness and warn continually against idolizing the family and the natural family and having children and marriage. And the right answer is not to basically convince people that one of the biggest sins they need to look out for is to love their wife too much, or their husband too much, or their children too much, and to say, no, the Lord finds your loves not too strong, but too weak. You need to love your wife more. Love her 10 times more than you do now, and you still won't be to how much you will love her in eternity. Love your children 100 times more, and you still won't approach the love that God the Father has for his sons. Our loves are too weak. Our feelings are too weak. When we sing Psalm 42, number 83 in our hymnal, as the heart about to falter, my though I'm deeply moved by that psalm regularly, my heart is far too weak in its affection for what David and the Lord intended to stir up in that psalm. When I'm singing the Psalm 98, the glory of the Lord, and how let rivers clap and mountains sing, and all creation join in this joyful dance. When David says, talks about dancing and singing before the Lord and all these things, we are way too half-hearted. God is not worried that we might actually love something too much. That's not what idolatry is. It's out of its proper order. We love God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength, partly by loving the things that he told us to love.
Yeah, that's really
in
good.
his name.
That's really good.
This is just like one of the key category errors that we keep stumbling into, and it makes us anti-human. It makes us so we can't be human beings. We were made to love, like we were made to delight. We were made to weep. We were made to enjoy. We were made to feel. And you get this robotic, just absolute anti-human loser theology that its biggest gripe with Bethel is that they made people feel things, or they used a smoke machine. That's stupid.
Yeah, Dan, I agree with you. Dan, I guess we can close out. I just want to ask you this question because you brought it up in your talk. One of the things is kind of what we've been talking about that motivates a lot of the criticism and the infighting is what you refer to as the crab barrel effect. You see somebody making progress. You see somebody doing something. The man in the arena is doing something, and you stand on the sidelines and you criticize him. Well, this wasn't done right, and that wasn't done right. And well, if I was in charge, it would have been better. Why do we need to defeat the crab barrel mentality within the movement?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that you have this baseline of sediment in which we've existed for generations now, probably 2 generations at least, to where nobody aspires, nobody has the will, nobody aspires to greatness, you know, in the ways that we've been talking. I mean, this is like talking about home. How many times have we wished that our great-great-grandfather had owned that piece of property, or had, you know, bought a real estate, you know, investment company, or had, I don't know, many things, like actually like invested money wisely so that we would have a foothold. That's not been our experience. And so we're all like kind of at the bottom of the crab barrel in a way, starting over, to where nobody really had the will to aspire to American greatness. And my warning was that when you see somebody actually escaping the bottom of the crab barrel, when you see somebody recovering the will and actually having some sort of success, and I think this is what is happening to us and to many others across the country that I've spoken to, is that people have dreams and desires and great visions for the future, and they start discipling their children, they start doing things, and the people that have they're just still in the sediment. They're still just in the mire, you know, and they're looking up at this crab, this person who is ascending while just doing good work in their field. And the natural human inclination is to pull them down, is to criticize, because they see something and that somebody else is doing as great work, and there's some sort of guilt or something that they don't even realize, and they're jealous. There's envy, there's malice, there's bitterness. And so what ends up happening is you get Theodore Roosevelt's man in the arena in real life. And that's what we have experienced with critics. And I know many other people have experienced this as well, even within your own families, to where your parents might even be like this, to where they become the most bitter critics of what you're doing, as you're like, these are your grandchildren, and I'm trying to raise them up and to give them something that I didn't have. You should be proud of the legacy I'm leaving. And instead, like Theodore Roosevelt said, the poorest way to face life is to face it with a sneer. And what ends up happening is, as you're doing this great work, there are many people who will face you with a sneer, people that are supposed to be for you, and they will try to pull you down. But I mean, you should go out and read the speech, The Man in the Arena. It's very encouraging. And so I just don't want you to be discouraged by those sorts of people, because they will succeed in their mission to just pull you down. And you're like, the work is too hard. I'll just sit down in the arena.
So true. I wrote an article about this like 10 years ago, before most of...
He was a pioneer.
It's called Your cynicism is boring me. And I wrote it because I had been interacting with several leaders in kind of our small circle at that point. It was constant cynics. Everything was sarcasm and cynicism and no hope and black pilling. And it was this like moment where I was reading Revelation and looking at the glory of Christ's victory in Revelation. And and I wasn't post-millennial at this time or anything. It was like, I was offended by the cynicism. It was like, and we should be, by that sneer. That sneer you should scorn it. You should absolutely hate that sneering instinct in your own heart, because it arises in all of us. Envy and bitterness, all these things, they produce this sneer. But then also you should just not be steered by the sneering of sneerers. Don't let them steer you.
Yeah, one thing you've talked about a lot, this is one of the things actually I think when I first met you that was attractive was, and you meant it wasn't just lip service, but there is not a fixed pie of glory.
Yeah.
And one of the best disciplines for me personally has been every time you see somebody succeeding, especially in the ways you wish you were, but aren't.
Yep.
Praise God, give thanks, and even encourage that person.
Yes.
To say, hey, I'm actually really glad that the Lord is blessing your work.
Yeah. And don't say it like, I'm so glad the Lord is blessing your work, brother.
But to actually rejoice.
But mean it. And if you don't mean it, ask the Lord, please help me mean it. Because we're weak, we're so weak. Our flesh is so, it wants to sin. We want to sin. We want to be gods. And we're not. And there's so much joy when you're like, I'm not a God. God blesses everybody. I'm so thankful that he's working in that person or doing that thing.
Yes.
It's such a hard discipline, but it is so good for your soul. And for leaders, it's so good for the culture of your people. Because you will reproduce the sneer or the smile. Like you will reproduce that in your people one way or the other. And not just an individual leader, but the collective, all of the leaders and the character of the leaders as they relate on a team and in cohort, that will be reflected and incarnated and reified in your people.
It has been very encouraging, by the way, as I thought through giving this talk with the man in the arena and the critic and all that, the people in our church and the people at the conference, the thing I heard over and over again was, I really appreciate your work. What can I do to help? Mm-hmm. And we saw this with our volunteers. Many of them took time off of work. Their vacation time that they get, a generous 2 weeks from their, Globo Homo corporation that they're working at. And they took their vacation time to help us in this work. And so what that's done for me is when I talk to men who are like, they're really successful, they're just killing it, whatever they're doing. And my inclination, in part because of the people that I'm around and the culture that they are making as well, is to say, that's a really good work. I'm really happy for you. What can I do to help?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you see opportunities for Christians supporting one another in unity. And what could you accomplish? Yeah. Is there a limit to what you could accomplish by those who have been bought by the blood of Christ, who actually love one another and take joy in seeing the success of their brother and in helping them to succeed? I don't think there is a limit to what we could accomplish.
No, so encouraging. Brian, I'll have you close us out. Before we do, we've got a few things to note. Number one, talks, if they're not already out by the time this releases, they will be.
Yeah.
So you can share those, listen.
Subscribe on our YouTube, New Christendom Press YouTube channel, and our Twitter. We'll share them, the videos natively on Twitter.
Yes. So that'll be great. I think it'll be a huge encouragement to people. We also will have a pre-order for Lexi's book.
Yep.
Want to really encourage people. We wanted to have it at the conference. Kind of some snafus with the printer, I should say. We're the publisher. But with the printer, didn't get the books in time, but they're going to be here.
Yeah, they're going to be here shortly.
That is a great book. Very excited about it.
We'll put a link in the description for the pre-order, and I volunteered my wife for this, but she was happy to. She actually has good handwriting. She's going to sign all the pre-ordered copies.
Right.
Just as a thank you for everybody and supporting us, and little company like ours. When we're ordering thousands of books ahead of time, it's quite expensive, and it really helps us, and has every time we've published a book that we've had significant pre-order support from you guys. So as our thank you, all the conference copies that folks pre-ordered at the conference, and then also the pre-orders that we bring in before they'll be signed. Once it's out, they'll just be the normal book. She's, has 7 of my children, so she doesn't have time to just sign books all day. But those will be signed copies, every pre-ordered copy. And also, our next year's conference tickets, like we said, are live. And I think it's worth highlighting that we've every year we've worked to try and make the conference a better deal, because we're honored by people giving their time and money to come join us. It's such a highlight of our year as a church and community. So encouraging. Like, we had a tremendous amount of fun at this conference getting to
And we
know
want
everybody.
families there.
So we launched a family pass this year, which makes it 30 or 40% cheaper for a family to come even than it was this last year. So you can now go buy one ticket for your family. A married couple and their children that are in their household, still living in their household, can come for this one price. There's some like forms to let us know how many people in your family, so we have room for everybody. But it's all live. The best price you'll get on it is right now, because it helps us know what venue we need, how big of a venue we need ahead of time. So you can go sign up right now and get tickets for next year, for 2026 to join us here. The dates are there. We'll be announcing speakers and that as we solidify them. But
Yeah, I also thought it was cool. Martin did a lot of work with the venue and planning and doing everything. One of the things we had this year was a huge space as overflow for like kids and, moms and dads, and then a nursing mother's room. So just to emphasize, we are trying to make this as family friendly as possible.
Yeah.
We want you to bring your families. We want this to be something that's encouraging to all your people.
yeah, we spent 4 times, I think, more on our venue this year than the previous year. This is not like a huge profit generating event for us. We spend quite a bit to try and make it as great of an experience as we can, try to give you back the value that you've put in the ticket, and then some. And it's very logistically complex. We've had multiple staff members working for weeks in preparation. And then, most of them worked 80 plus hours the week of the conference to pull it off. And it was, I think, our best conference yet. They did such a good job. Martin, Evan, Ethan, and the team, lots of other people too. So if you didn't already, send them a note of thanks to the Twitter, and just say, hey, New Christendom Press staff, great job. We appreciate you, because they absolutely killed it, and we were very proud of the work that they did. And looking forward next year to even leveling up. We've been talking and scheming about ways, like with our the games and with some of the events we did. We try to get. It's not just sitting and listening to talk, but participating, meeting people, networking. And so even this year was a high water mark for that. Next year, we're going to get an even higher high water mark on that, in getting folks to participate and just be able to actually join in.
Yeah,
so
fantastic.
So we'd love to have you here in 2026 and be honored by your presence.
Absolutely. Any final words?
Yeah, I would just say, thank you to everybody that came. Genuinely, we were honored by your presence. Like I said, it's expensive to get to Utah, and it's a huge pain. And you guys brought like 15 kids apiece, and it was absolutely amazing. We had so much fun getting to know you guys, meeting with you, and we hope and pray that it was edifying to your family, and that you're taking back encouragement and help and practical help in obeying the Lord and bearing fruit where you are. And wherever you are, put your back into doing your job. Your job isn't the same as Eric's job or my job or Stephen's job. It doesn't have to be. What did the Lord put in your hands was your job description. Do it with all of your might. Do it with zeal. Do it with creativity. And the Lord will bless. He delights to bless his people as they obey him and walk in obedience and in faith and repentance, and with zeal pursue the things he's put in front of you. So whatever measure of faith the Lord's given you, turn it to a profit for his kingdom and his glory, and we'll catch you next time on the King's Hall.